Hi, folks who just joined us. I'm just going to allow it a couple of seconds so participants can roll in. Awesome. Hello and welcome to today's public program, Combine 2022, a conversation on collaboration, which is part of the Combine Art Fair 2022 programming. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Wil Aballe and I am the Public Programs and Residency Coordinator here at Griffin Art Projects. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. As well, we would like to thank AXA, Goodman, Canadian Heritage, and North Vancouver Recreation and Culture for their support of today's event. A few housekeeping notes before today's presentation. If you would like to see live captions displayed, you can enable this by selecting the CC Live Transcription button at the bottom of your screen. As well, if you're experiencing any technical issues with the Zoom interface, we are also live streaming today's event on Griffin Art Projects Facebook, so you can watch from there as well. And lastly, I'll mention that there will also be a chance at the end of today's presentation for audience questions. So if at any point throughout the presentation you have a question for our presenters, feel free to type it on the Q&A dialog box, which is on the bottom of your screen, and we will read that aloud. You can also raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you. Just do know that we are recording today's event. So if you choose to ask your question live, your voice will be recorded. So joining me today in conversation, we have Lisa Baldissera, Griffin Art Projects Director. We have Monica Reyes, Director of Monica Reyes Gallery. We have Tobin Gibson, Director of Unit 17, Wil Aballe, Director of Wil Aballe Art Projects, as well as this year's new gallerist to the fair, Hugues Charbonneau, Director of Galerie Hugues Charbonneau. So welcome everyone. If you can turn on your video, that'll be great. I'm gonna start spotlighting everyone. So just a sec here. At spotlight. Tobin, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you turn on your video?
Just 1 second.
Yeah, for sure. And awesome, thank you. So to begin today's conversation, I thought that it would be a good idea to maybe recap how the fair started. So I'll pass the mic to Monica to tell us a little bit about that.
Hi everyone. So the concept of the fair started out of necessity. During the pandemic, we were not able to travel, and we were not able to attend the fairs that we were all doing in different places. So as we were having parallel conversations and we were checking in with each other to see how we were doing, this idea of doing something locally sort of like grew out of this necessity, as I was saying. And Griffin and Lisa Baldissera in particular was instrumental in helping us materialize this concept, because they saw the opportunity right away as something that is complementary to the mandate of the Griffin Art Project. So we're very grateful for that. But I think that in a nutshell, that's how it got started.
Yeah, and maybe Lisa, you can tell us what is that mandate of Griffin Art Projects.
Thank you, Fauna. That's a good prompt. Griffin's mandate is to show private collections to the public, but also to nurture emerging collectors and to grow the idea of collecting, the idea of the arts ecology here locally, and really have an extended conversation about what collecting means. So I think in terms of the invitation, I was really excited by the invitation, and we had 2 runs at it because we just followed the waves, those waves of COVID that came. And so we tried twice. And then finally we were able to, in December of last year, actually have the fair. And it was really exciting and well attended, and a kind of transformation of the residency. But also I think a sort of the scale of it is so interesting because it means that people can have conversation and linger, and it's not quite as daunting as the the exponential effect of a Frieze art fair or a Art Basel, if I could be so bold as to even mention them. But I think having the scale of this has really been exciting, and having a front row seat as Griffin, I think, to the processes of the gallerists. They've been very generous with sharing how they're thinking through things and the things that excite them. So for Griffin, I think it's just been an extraordinary collaboration. So we're really grateful.
Yeah, thank you. And then to open up the conversation to everyone here, to Hugues and Wil and Tobin. So what would you say are some of the new insights that you have on collaboration and gallery-led efforts that you have now working on this project together? Whoever wants to start.
Well, I've participated in a number of gallery collaborations, such as this one, and I find them quite generative because galleries of this scale, kind of operating in this way where we support the local art making, the challenges are similar. We often don't talk to each other. We kind of work quite independently throughout the years, and since the pandemic, it's made more and more sense to actually like work together and share our resources and share our knowledge and kind of like build something that's a little bit stronger, a little bit more intentioned, and kind of like develop that. And Combine, I think, is a really terrific way to do that for the West Coast art scene. But the inclusion of Hugues Gallery this year, I think, is really remarkable because Canada is a really big place, and we don't often have a lot of opportunities to have a dialogue between Western Canada and Eastern Canada. And these small gestures, Hugues being here, taking the time, sharing ideas with each other amongst each other is really sort of something I think that's going to be generative into the future. So
Nice.
I feel that way.
How about you?
Oh, well, I couldn't resist the invitation. I met Monica in Toronto with a really good connection right away, and I had the pleasure to work with Lisa in the past, and it was an extremely thoughtful collaboration. And so for me, it was very attractive, this idea of a more curated fair, less gallery, but more time to reflect on the art within this, and to have a curated section. I kind of resist the larger art fair model. Like, there's something that as someone who really love art and who really appreciate working with artists, I find it's a bit inhuman sometimes, the scale of those larger fairs. It's a necessity to some degree. We have to do them, but it is not something that pleasant. And so the idea to be in a more community-based fair was extremely attractive. And I think, actually, interestingly enough, I had the pleasure to give a lecture with Isabelle Grau, who's a theoretician of the art market. She lives in Germany, and she's got a reference point in the art market, and she thinks that the large art fair model is coming to a point where it's cracking. It's serving only a dozen of galleries in the world, that are kind of central, and then all the rest of the art world is a pedestal for them, basically, and funding them. But she thinks that it's not viable financially for most galleries. And so there will be, I think, other models growing slowly. And as technology is advancing, as those kind of more local initiatives are growing, or also the idea of galleries more and more collaborating in different countries, together and building the profile of artists together in from different countries. I think we'll see they will remain those large fairs, but they'll be less dominant, maybe in the decades to come. That would be my feeling. So anyway, so all that said, I'm really excited to participate in what could become an alternative to all this.
Ooh, we're going to return to that because that's actually one of the questions that I'm very eager to delve into. But before we do that, I would like to hear from Tobin. What are some of the new insights that you have on collaboration and gallery-led efforts now that you're working with all these folks?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like trying to focus on the new insights because we always know that these kind of, I don't know, there's a different way that this kind of close-knit collaboration is that we're able to pivot and kind of think on our feet and sort of facilitate things that we all know that we need, rather than speaking through many teams of people, many sort of tiers of people to get our point across or communication. But the new insight is basically just that, you know, this is an ideal context, and to be able to collaborate with peers, you get to know them so much better in the process. And you can really see how galleries can sort of continue collaborating, linking up and whatever. So I think that it's more about that it's an ideal context and a project that I'm so excited to continue growing.
Yeah, and going kind of, yeah, like hearing you say that and kind of going back to Hugues' insights on like the community scale of Combine. Can any one of you talk about like how is this model differs from other art fairs, and what do you see like happening in the future with this kind of community scale art fair?
I think even just sort of speaking to some of the fairs that Lisa mentioned as she was kind of opening things up, these fairs, you do see the kind of cracks happening now. And this kind of, as Hugues said, sort of propping up the very top tier blue chip galleries. And there's all this way of sort of, it's not necessarily greenwashing, but it's another thing where the fairs try to say, but the sort of young sections are cheaper, they're subsidized by the big galleries. It's still very expensive, but still the whole context, you arrive there perhaps and you present your work, but no one's coming around in the same way that they're sort of anchored and localized around these big 12 global galleries. So the fair offers people to be a bit slower, to talk to people, talk to the dealers, talk to us, and just be in more kind of conversation.
And so far,
yeah, I would also like to add that those fairs are operated by companies that have, you know, a profit mandate, and so they're run as a business. What we are doing is a fair that is by dealers, for dealers, you know, and for our community and for our artists. So there's like fundamentally a difference in the way that we see how we're collaborating and presenting it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Will or Hugues or Lisa, would you like to add to that?
I mean, for me, it's interesting just to have a front row seat because I've always been working in nonprofits, so I have never been a gallerist in the same way, and so you know, my curiosity is just about in terms of like opening it up so that there's a conversation with an audience who may be curious about collecting. That collecting is such an interesting part of our particular arts form. You know, like theater, it's a different kind of rationale, right? It's a collective. It's people buying tickets. That it's so ours is has this complexity to it because we're always grappling with a market, and that is part of the conversation. Often in nonprofits, it's in stealth mode. I mean, if you're in your sort of ivory tower of an institution and you're getting your public funding and you are getting sponsorship and you are getting private funding. I mean, Griffin's a really prime example of that. You know, we are generously funded by the Friday Foundation, which makes the whole thing possible. So it's making that more visible. Like, what does philanthropy mean? What does what are the complexities of this arts ecology, and where does that art market fit in? How does collecting fit in, as opposed to having it sort of on the periphery of a museum or nonprofit gallery practice? So for me, it's been really interesting just watching this unfold and hearing the conversations, hearing the challenges. So and yeah, making that part of our program, the discussions part of the program where we're actually talking about it directly.
Which is something else that's interesting, is that the fair is organized by galleries, but also there's an institution involved, which is a kind of collaboration that is, you know, the art world at a certain point in its history has created a gap between the institution and the market. It was not always like that. I mean, in Canada in the 70s, through the artist and culture, we needed that gap. I think it was a period where we needed it. But I think lately, maybe we're in a period where we need to work again more and more between the collaboration between, it's happening, it's always happening, but it's interesting to think of a model of an art fair where we recognize that the contribution of an institution. For an artist to really succeed, you cannot just succeed with institution. You need at some point the market and the collectors to come in the ecosystem, but just the market and the ecosystem, that market and the gallery system cannot bring an artist to a full potential career. So you need the collaboration between the two. And of course, the third thing that's important is the kind of a critical reflection on what's happening with the artists, which is and now galleries and institutions are generating their own critical thinking through social media and through what we're doing exactly right now, like those meetings and exchanging ideas. But anyway, so artists need us to work together and to amplify their voice in a more complex way than just selling an artwork. Yes. And then on the other side, just showing in a nonprofit won't help allow an artist to reach a full potential either.
And
I think on a more pragmatic level, there's also the fact that this Combine Art Fair has come up from the ground rather than top down, is we're able to sort of consider all the various elements that have gone into this weekend, and anything that isn't really serving this sort of idea of presenting our artists' work to the best audience possible in the best context possible could be rethought through, possibly edited out, renegotiated. Whereas when you go into a large fair, a larger fair, you don't have those abilities to make those decisions. Things are dictated, and a lot of the decisions, because the corporations that run the fairs basically run them generically like any trade show. We don't have control over them, so we're often just to the whim of those predetermined things, which makes doing art fairs quite unpleasant, to Hugues' earlier point. And I think beyond that, there's also the fact that our 4 galleries are sort of in large part representing artists who are emergent. Our programs all have very established artists who are doing well internationally, but they're emerging in different ways, emerging within the local ecosystem, emerging within Canada, or emerging internationally. The audience that's coming through this particular fair is very focused and very interested in the kind of art that we're showing. And there's a real, and I think it's showing up in the caliber of the conversations that we've been having throughout the 2 years of Combine in person during the fair weekends, versus like when you're in a larger fair like Art Toronto or Frieze or Basel or NADA, which I did in Miami. Like, you know, they're going in wanting to really primarily look at work that they're already familiar with, shown by galleries that are at the top of the heap or at the blue chip level, which is a different layer of the art world that doesn't have much bearing to like what it is that we do on the ground here, our 4 galleries. So yeah, so I think it's more meaningful, and it's really, it makes more sense. And so I think Combine is a really terrific thing.
excellent. And Touching on what you, Will, and Oak were talking about or mentioning emerging artists that you work with, and I really like the comment that you make, Oak, of like how this fair is doing more than just selling artists' work. So I wonder if you would like to talk about the artists that you are showing this year.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to start or?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure, for sure. Well, no. There's basically I brought two artists, and this was the result of a conversation again with the other dealers and Lisa. But I think what was interesting in the artists I selected is that they are not your typical Montreal artists. They are not who you would think is a Montreal artist. So basically, one of them is Shuvnai Ashuna. So Shuvnai lives in Kinget on Baffin Island, and I had the honor to show her work for a few years now, but we selected again a very specific body of work of hers. So basically, we came with a curatorial proposition, not to do a best of Shuvnai or the typical Shuvnai work, but to come with an approach to her earlier works from the 90s and early 2000s, very introspective landscape, very intimist work, which is kind of going against the grain of because she's at the Venice Biennale, everybody wants what she's doing, what she did at the Venice Biennale, which is those huge, colorful drawing. But sometimes you have to educate people and deepen the understanding of an artist's practice. Mm-hmm. So by bringing lesser known works, I'm trying to enlarge the portrait here. And the artwork does that, you know. Collectors want what's known, etc., and you have to remind them sometimes to just get a bit off, and then they get excited about what they see. They get a deeper understanding of the artist, and same thing for the curators, and it leads to more interesting projects for the artists. The other artist I selected with the others is Manuel Mathieu. So Manuel is an artist who was born in Haiti and who moved to Montreal later in his life. He lived in Montreal, he did his BFA there, but then he did his MFA in London. And Manuel is a real citizen of the world. Like as we speak, he's in Paris. He was in Germany before that. He's going to do a project in China next year, England, and in Miami. So he's traveling a lot, but his heart is based in Montreal. We're lucky that he fell in love with someone in Montreal. So he keeps coming back to Montreal. And so I have the pleasure also to have a very close friendship with him and collaborate very closely with him. So anyway, so Manuel brings, Montreal is I think the second largest Haitian diaspora in the world, and certainly one of the most dynamic in the world, with writers like Denis Laferrière, but artists like Manuel, for example, Stanley Février, Clovis Alexandre Desvarieux. There's so many great Haitian artists based in Montreal. So I wanted to honor that a bit, and I think make people realize that in Montreal there's such a dynamic scene right now, and it's not the kind of French Canadian traditional scene only. There's multiple voices expressing themselves, and I want to basically show a bit of that. And also I think it's exciting for Manuel. It was exciting because he's shown around the world, but he's not that known in Canada. And it was the first time that his work is ever shown in Vancouver. So it's really exciting for him. This being said, can I talk about the art too? Because we talk name when we do name dropping, but we should talk about the art. So Manuel's art just very fast. And again, it's a bit in link with what Shuvnai is doing with the landscape. On this you have Shuvnai's work, the kind of more introspective landscape, psychological space. And that piece I brought by Manuel is we could see dealing with the kind of turmoil of Haiti on a poetic level, like Haiti that's gone through so much trauma and amnesia. And so the work of Manuel destabilizes us. It's a work that doesn't give us precise keys, but so we're in kind of the Caribbean landscape, the turmoil of it, also the political, the erasure. So it's a work that takes a few looking, can I say that? You have to look at it a few times before and look at many of his artwork to slowly get into what is a complex practice. I sometimes say it's a bit like a bruise. We don't know how to deal with a bruise. We don't want to really look at it. But when you think of it, it's nature rejuvenating itself. It's healing. It's nature, the strength of nature. And Manuel's work a bit like that. It's traumatic. It's dealing with taboos, things we don't want to see, but at the same time, it's showing us that humans have this resilience, and that people in Haiti have this resilience, and they have hope. So it's a very deep practice, and I'm very happy to show it.
Thank you for sharing. Who would like to go next?
Okay, so I'll talk about the seven, I think it's seven
Do you want to
artists.
take the computer there? Or?
Sure, yeah. 7 artists who I've brought this year. They're primarily practices that are West Coast based, but there are a couple of people who have interactions with the West Coast and the themes of ecology that sort of permeate through a lot of the works in the presentation that the dialogue would be enriched by. And so we have, like for instance, a work by Liliana Mead Martin. These are charred wood pieces with polyurethane cast pieces are evocative of the body, and particularly ears and kind of this image of like nature listening to us. And we have a North Vancouver born artist who's now based in Basel, Don Nilo, who made this landscape. It's very reminiscent of Takanabe's work, but through this process called Lazur. She's based in Basel, and she's sort of like found great success in Switzerland by becoming a finalist at the 2020 Swiss Art Award. And so it's kind of great to bring her work back and recontextualize it within this place where she was born. And there's a number of other artists as well. Megan Hill-Carroll. We have porcupine quill work by Vanessa Dion Fletcher. And then we have 2 digital works by Nicholas Sassoon and Stephen Cottingham, and also some works by Glenn Lewis, who's a more senior artist. So a little bit different than the rest of the presentation in that he's been having an art career for about 50, 60 years now. So yeah, so remarkable. Monica?
Sure. I think I'll do the same. I'll do a little walkthrough.
Yeah, we can. Or do you want to leave your there and use my computer? Let's do this.
If I want to switch,
I'm gonna turn my computer. I'll go with my
switch the camera here. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Great. Perfect. So I'll start with Kathy Slade. This is a tapestry that is a section of a portrait of Lucrezia by Bronzino. And we're also highlighting that Kathy is going to be having a solo exhibition at the Contemporary Art Gallery this coming February. We brought a work by Jan Wade, who is a senior artist and the first Black female artist to have a solo exhibit at the Vancouver Art Gallery in the 90s year history of the institution. We're showing her works, her newer works at our Mackenzie location. And so for those of you in Vancouver, we want to invite you to come up to 33rd and Mackenzie and look at her other sculptures that she just finished within the last 2 weeks. The work of Bernadette Pan. She's a local painter with an incredible technique. It's hard to see how many different shades of color are in this painting. On the surface, it looks like a black painting, but if you start looking at much closer, you'll see that there's actually no black, and it's made out of all this different colors, like dark blues and violet. Terence Turner, we brought a very playful wall sculpture by him. This one is titled Wish Me Luck. It's black powder coated aluminum sculpture. And it falls into also our category of affordable art. We wanted to bring a little bit of a selection and different price points. So in order to, you know, educate a younger collection base. These are paintings by Maggie Day, who has really become a sort of like a sensation. Her work was extremely well received in Toronto. We sold out all of her works. We only have small scale works available right now. We can't wait to see what she's going to give us in the coming year. But these are very true to her overall style and practice. Loose brush strokes, very gestural, very confident paintings, vibrant colors. We're so excited about Maggie. And I think that that's wraps it up from my end for our presentation this year.
Thank you for sharing, Monica. And I think we have Tobin.
Cool. Yeah, so I tried to bring a group of works that represented as many artist practices in the program. So there's about 15 individuals that we work with. So not everyone could participate, unfortunately. In Lisa's room that she curated, I'm always careful to not bring too many works by those artists. So there's a bit more sort of overall summaries. So in that show, there's Marisa Kranguat-Holmes' work, four pieces, which were shown at Polygon Gallery, and then 4 paintings by Nadia Isabella that just came from her solo show at Libby Leschgold. So in the room that Hugues is pointing to, there's many things. Anne Lau has pieces towards the back window. There's this black chair called Mother Furniture. It was from her solo show the last year at the gallery. It is a functional object, so we've been using it as booth furniture a little bit. Tristan Unrau has 3 cardboard and bronze sculptures kind of in the center there, with 2 paintings to the right, Dew, which is from 2017, and Dress Form from 2014. And then a number of works by Gabrielle Larendel Hill, who also has been widely celebrated recently, a MoMA exhibition in 2021, and just finished a presentation in the group exhibition at the Venice Biennial as well. So it's very special to bring these works. We showed these 2 sculptures on this table in 2019, and they've been kind of going everywhere. And the photograph is also hers, which is a bit of an unknown work. She doesn't really make lens-based art, but so it's interesting to bring this kind of work. And I really wanted to highlight this piece in particular, knowing that Stan Douglas's show is downstairs, and in particular, a piece hangs there called Hogan's Alley. So these 2 pieces I wanted to sort of bring attention to in terms of their geographic relationship in the city. This image is on Clark Drive. They have different kind of structures in terms of how the images get made and why, but always nice to sort of think more largely about the Griffin, and especially the founders, Birgitte and Henning, because they have been instrumental to even inspiring the name of the fair. We call it Combine because of Rauschenberg, who's a key artist in their collection that they purchased very early. They have incredible pieces of his. Anyway, so, and there's other works by Christian Visten, who has a solo show opening next Saturday at the gallery, Daria Akai, Douglas Watt, so lots of different people.
Thank you. And perhaps, Lisa, not to put you on the spot, but a little bit to do that. Could you talk about like potential conversations that you see all these artists in the space having with their artworks? What do you see?
Well, it was really thinking about the show theme this year, the escape variant, which is a medical term actually about something that actually is a new variant that, as it sounds, that eludes new vaccines, that eludes the body's immunization. So one of the things I was thinking about was repetition and variation. So you see that in Bernadette Pham's work, this kind of beautiful process that but it's also very meditative. And it really struck me that in this sort of the last few years, all of us have had a newfound interiority as we've been sort of isolated and even still kind of coming out of that sort of navigating that space of interiority with the space of conviviality again. And so it felt to me like that was I could feel her producing that work, and it's just such exquisite work. And the same with Chantal Gibson's work, you know, really relying on repetition, but in this case, that work is called Queer Theory, and it's really, there's just one spoon that has a little bit of a variation. And if you look very, very closely, you can see that there are different texts on each of them. And so it does invite this kind of intimacy and domesticity. And that reminded me of Evan Stevens' work, where she's, you know, with her dog in the studio, having this kind of dance with the broom and the dog, and this kind of estranging of the normal, which is what we experienced when we were endlessly hours in domestic spaces that we weren't freed from. So you said, you know, I could imagine someone, and in fact, people did invent dances to just deal with that isolation. And so it feels to me like that really sort of spoke to me, as did Barry Dupay's video work, where you can see this kind of staring at something that just keeps evolving and evolving as an image. So there were a number of things. Nadia Isabella's beautiful, intimate paintings that are so striking because of their intensity. So what she can actually do in this very small frame, again, reminded me of that intensity of looking at small scale. And Manuel Matou, which was a wonderful discovery that you brought this year. And similarly, that I was just really interested to hear what you had to say about him, because it is what you feel when you're looking at that, only instead of landscape with those three, it almost feels like the body's there as well. There's this sense of staring, you know, there's a kind of fleshiness as well as an atmospheric quality to those works. So yeah, and I think with Marissa's work, you know, there's this quality of layering and again, a kind of intensity of sort of being at home, maybe having a kitchen table practice again, where you might be doing these collages, which I think is so sweet, and then the scale of them. So I really love that kind of the thought that art can be made anywhere. And so what does it mean when you have certain constraints, whether they're economic or spatial? And so I really appreciated all the gallerists collaborating with me, because each of them responded and said, here's what we think might actually respond to that theme. So it was very much a collaborative curatorial project. So thank you to all of you.
Yeah, and before I ask one of my last questions, I would like to remind the audience that if they have any question, they can use the Q&A panel box to post a question, and then I'll read it to our gallerists. And touching on what Hugues was mentioning, and I believe also Monica, like you were talking about like educating people to deepen the understanding of the artists, particularly emerging artists. So I wonder, like, as gallerists, how do you see this role, and how do you implement this education of people towards the artists that you are representing?
I think on my side, the specificity of a gallerist versus a curator, because I started my career as a curator. I worked for an art magazine, and later I became a dealer. But the specificity is repetition. When you're a curator and you work with an artist for a given show, basically, yeah, that's your opportunity to curate something and bring deepen that practice. And let the public in. But when you're a gallerist, you repeat the experience. So I find that the best way for me to help an artist is to commit long term. And then you give a show, and then you bring that artist to a fair, and then you collaborate with a museum at a show, and then maybe you help funding a book about the artist. And 2 years later, you come back with a show. So it's the saying of Warhol is that everybody will get a 15 minutes of fame. But the other part of the quote is that, but to be famous, you need to be 15 times on TV, you know? And it's this idea, that's what we do as gallerists, is that we make sure the artists are 15 times on TV, you know? That they're on a platform 15 times. And so, so for example, I showed some of the colorful work of Chauvenay, now I'm showing another part of what she does. I contributed to a book about her. So I come back from different angles many different times. And that's how we educate, basically. I don't think my role is to be the most skilled writer. And I'm certainly not the best curator in the country. I'm just committing to an artist long term, and it's a journey. It's a long journey, and for an artist, it can change a life. When you have someone who commits to you very, very long term. It does things differently, and it opens all kind of door. And then when I open a door for one artist, the other artists in the gallery beneficiate from that new door. So then we share the resources within the community that the gallery is. And so that's what we do basically. We repeat, we accumulate meaning, we accumulate potential, we open doors, we share resources. And that's how we, as gallerists, have an opportunity to educate the public.
Mhm. That's great. Will anyone like to add to that?
I think that Hug just wrapped it up so nicely. That's very eloquently explained what we typically do. I want to emphasize that the long-term commitment and working with artists for the long run is what also a gallery like all four of us share in common, is that we do. In order to see an artist succeed and an artist's career take off, you need to invest a great deal of time in order to support their career, in order to see a progression and a development of their practices as well, which is the most interesting, I think, part that one can have as a gallerist, is seeing like all this evolution in an artist's life and in their practice. But yeah, the long-term commitment, I see something as a strength.
I would just reiterate that's one of the things I've really so enjoyed, is working closely with all of you on this project and seeing that deep commitment and relationship, that all of you are so passionate about the artists that you represent. You're so committed to them, and it is a relationship. And so I think that is something that has been just very heartwarming to see, especially in this moment that we're in, where these acts of care. I think making that visible, that in the work that you're doing, there's this act of care and commitment, and I think that's also not necessarily across the board with everyone who's working with artists in your capacity. I think that's something that you're doing uniquely, and that's really just really exciting in terms of thinking of the nurturing of an art's ecology.
I have to say that I've been extremely impressed by the three colleagues here. I think their commitment to their artists, like they all get up early in the morning, work super hard days, and they talk about their artists with so much passion. Like I have to say that the artists are very lucky to have you guys, because you mean it, you want them to succeed, you're putting all your life into this. And it's not all the galleries that do that. I think Vancouver is very lucky, and also you want to collaborate and work together at building a scene. So it's I've kind of fallen in love with all of you here.
That's sweet. And we have the first question from an audience member. So you can see it on the Q&A panel box, but I'm gonna read it out loud for captioning purposes. So we have a question from Susie Mill, and she asks, can the galleries speak on how they select artists? Do they travel the country on studio visits? Do they have conversations with art institutions about who is up and coming? How do they garner such a vast sample for making their selection? Thank you.
I maybe want to just jump in and say that, as Lisa pointed out, these relationships are the first sort of point, and many times they happen gradually over a long period of time, where you might be working in another space, for example, in my case, and you've been following artists for a long time. That space might close and you continue the relationship. We are doing studio visits across the country. If we say are in Toronto for the art fair, we might be looking out and doing visits outside of that if we have the capacity and time and energy. Similarly, if we're in Montreal or other cities. So we're always looking, and a big part of how I've tried to structure things with Unit 17 also is really allowing anyone to submit work as long as it's sort of legible and we can move through it in some kind of organized way, because we simply cannot know all of the work that's being made. And so it's amazing to be able to see artists sort of come through our emails or come through the space and really just get to know them, because it's so much about that, where you can introduce yourself to any one of us, I'm sure, in our galleries if we're there on a particular day, and we would be, taking that conversation forward. So there's so many ways that we develop those relationships, and I'm sure the other gallerists can speak to their own histories and examples, but yeah, very dynamic.
For me, it's the most important thing we do. Is the key. It can make you or break you as a dealer when you pick an artist. Great artists will attract other great artists, but bad artists will attract bad artists. Great artists will attract great curators, great collectors. So it's like it's the most important things. And also it's a long-term commitment. In that's one of my pride. In 10 years, I've never shown the door to any artist. So if I commit, I commit. So I've never decided it was not lucrative enough or whatever. I believe in an artist and I keep going no matter what. So let's say, maybe I'll spend 10 hours a week searching for artists, although I only take one every 2 or 3 years. So look at the number of hours invested in that versus the result. It's the most important thing we do. So I sit on juries for competition. When I'm invited to go give crits in universities, I always accept. I read, I'm on Instagram, of course. I travel, I look at everything I can. And I trust my artists also. The one thing I don't do is that was mentioned in question. I don't ask cues to institution, because then I would lose my purpose. If I'm waiting for a museum to tell me what to show, then what's my purpose here? I'm supposed to discover an artist and help that artist get in the museum, not the other way around, not parasite an artist who's getting museum recognition. So but I really trust my artists, and that's how I discovered some of my best collaborators. It was through some of my artists, and feeling that artist was already basically at just one step of separation from the gallery. They were already half in because they were sharing so many ideas and values with some of my artists. And I would see those artists and they would be in the surroundings of the gallery. And I believe in that. I take a lot of, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years before committing. But I follow that artist, and if that artist never comes to the gallery or never gets involved with my other artists, it's a sign that maybe it's not the right fit. So I want to feel it's kind of natural somehow. So I take my time, and I'm at the point where I have that luxury to basically, and sometimes I lose opportunities. The worst thing that happens is you look at an artist, you believe in that artist, and suddenly that artist won an award. And suddenly every opportunist gallerist in Canada is starting to court the artist and all that. And that's when I step away. And I think maybe in 2 or 3 years, we'll see if we can pick up that dialogue. But I don't want to be there in that kind of opportunistic dynamic.
Yeah.
Wil or Monica, would you like to share?
I do a lot of studio visits. When people invite me to do a studio visit with them, I always say yes. I believe that we can't stop looking at art and what people are producing, artists are producing. It's very enriching. It does take a long time for conversations to develop, but it's an exciting part of what I do. I also trust my artists. There's been numerous times when they have pointed out in a direction that I should be paying attention, and that has worked out very well as well for all of us. It's a delicate process because it's a very long-term commitment, and sometimes it's a deep commitment in both like monetary expenses and energy and everything else before one can start seeing results. You know, we've did like 2 or 3 solo shows with a particular artist. That completely, like, you know, nothing happened, but we saw the potential was there, and it was just a matter of time. So 5-6 years later is when we started seeing results, and we were extremely pleased about that, of course. But we hold hands, you know, like that's what we do. So it's a long-term process, and like I said, studio visits are something that I'm never going to get tired of doing. I absolutely enjoy them, and I do them wherever I go. So if it's back to my original like place of birth, if I'm going back to Chile, I'll do many studio visits there. If I'm traveling for an art fair or even for you know, work or pleasure, I'm always interested in seeing what's happening in those particular places. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add a couple more points. I by and large agree with like what everybody has said so far. I also do a lot of studio visits and go to see as many shows as I can as I travel. It feels like everything that I do travel-wise is around art. And so it's a worldwide sort of like awareness of what's happening with the art discourse. The thing that I think I would like to add is the gallery's been around for 10 years, and it feels like the thing that we could do for artists is to sort of like lift them up to this platform the gallery's created and the network that the gallery has around it, and to kind of connect them and like help them move along their career by connecting to the relationships, key relationships that the gallery has. And over the years, that's become really, really clear. Like, I mean, we're you know, fortunate that in Canada, there's a lot of different types of art worlds. There's a lot of different art corners, and like the gallery operates and has its set of relationships where it operates kind of in a specific corner of it. And so one of the key questions that I ask, in addition to having months or years of conversations, like as you said, sometimes quite slowly, where another gallery comes in and like all of a sudden we're working with another gallery, because I'm quite slow in determining these types of things, but like having conversations with their artistic discourse and what it is that they're trying to do with their work, but also trying to figure out whether the gallery is the right fit for them, because it could be the most remarkable art practice, but if I don't particularly feel like I have the audience for that kind of work, maybe it's just best for that artist to be with another gallery. Because I think that, you know, it's important to make sure that there's a good fit. And so that's another thing that I determine. I mean, that's a very ambiguous answer, but art is like life, and these relationships are very organically grown, and so it becomes very clear over time whether it's a working relationship is there to move forward with or not. So yeah.
Thank you. I really like that all of you have talked about like these long-term relationships, and how like it takes time to develop those relationships with the artist, and it's not like one day to another kind of success, but it's an investment on the art and the artists. And I wonder, maybe as a way to wrap up this conversation, if you can tell me what do you see this fair contributing to the arts ecology in Vancouver long term?
Well, I think that, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I'd love to, you know, obviously continue to see this project grow like our galleries, that it's a lifetime of work and it's a commitment beyond sort of a 9 to 5. And I mean, you know, we're always looking, working, thinking about how things can connect and sort of move forward. So this does an amazing thing. It opens up opportunities for the galleries that have kind of held so much power over many decades here to sort of say, oh my gosh, there's an option to be more open-ended and to collaborate and to potentially just exist in a different way that's not as scarce and territorial. So I think that it's an amazing opportunity just to sort of continue this sort of very very core things that are so much about what Combine is.
Mhm. I have to also say that I feel like having this whole endeavor sit on the foundation of the support of Griffin Art Projects is a really important ingredient in the success of this endeavor so far, and like the way we perceive it might evolve quite positively into the future. And it's really because Griffin has is so well respected within our community and has like such a dedicated audience, and I mean our galleries share much of that audience, but like it's a real sort of reinforcement of values. I think the fact that we're all collaborating together in this way and having an art discourse. The conversations this weekend have been really terrific. I've really valued them. They feel different than conversations that I've had, like at other art fairs. And so like there's a real thoughtfulness, there's a real depth. And I think that's really a terrific testament to the strength of what Griffin has been able to set up for us and for this event through their network.
Mm.
I would like to add that although this is the second year and we're clearly growing, we added a new component aside from the guest visit of Hugues Charbonneau this year, which has been remarkable. But we also added a book section. So we're sharing the publications that we independently do and support, which is great. It's a new added value to our fair. And we've been thinking and talking about the way in which we want to grow it next year. So just to quote a fan of our fair, we're not quite at the stage of placing the flower inside the book and pressing it for like the winter time, but we are definitely watering that little seed that may grow into something else.
Thank you, Monica. Will, would you like to go next?
Oh, me? Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's a really terrific quote. Yeah, I think that there's real great potential with how this can go. I feel like, just traditionally the best fairs have their origins with galleries sort of mobilizing together, coming together with a shared vision and building something organically. And I think this is like, I mean, I'm not really sure like how it might evolve, like if the scale shifted and there's a lot more galleries, or whether it should stay at this like very boutique scale of 4 galleries approximately. But yeah, there's a really great potential here, and I feel like there is an audience being served for this. I think it's very enriching for the West Coast to have this effort be done, and we've already kind of seen that, like, the fair, even though it's a small one, is able to kind of traverse like many layers of the West Coast art world. We had like museum directors here over the weekend with like really critical kind of collectors from the region, and a lot of like curators have passed through, a lot of artists have passed through. And so I feel like it's really beneficial for people who really care about art to have this fair exists. And yeah, it's organic, and it will be interesting to see how it evolves into the future. Possibilities could be anything really that we see fit for it. So
yeah, and I'm very interested in hearing from Hugues, especially coming from the East. What's your perspective of this?
The fair, well, it's interesting. I think a lot in life, and as I was here, I was thinking of all kinds of things, but at the same time, I don't want to interfere too much, because I feel it's something that grew very organically. And so if I was coming with business suggestions or networking suggestions or things like that, I don't want to deviate, can I say that? Anyway, to change the course of something that is evolving so naturally and beautifully. But if I can say anything, of course, now with what I kind of see happening is kind of an outstanding art scene. So much good art being produced here, good artists, generous dealers wanting to help those artists and all that. And of course, the seduction would be to find a way to export that or share that with an audience, of course, locally, but also how can you bring it to a larger audience across the country? I'm sure. Could it be by having a tiny little online platform where collectors that follow my gallery see that there's a fair going on and they can see what the other galleries here are putting forward, or through Instagram, having more of the artworks available on view, or simple things that can, it's interesting that I think it was 2 years ago, a statistic came out that 98% of collectors in the world had purchased an artwork on Instagram, for example. Not that they purchased mostly on Instagram, they purchased mostly in galleries, fairs, etc. But 98% of them at least purchased one artwork on Instagram. So all those things could be game changers also for the arts. And there's so much talent in Vancouver, and I think it deserves to be better known to a wider audience, and of course all the gallerists here are doing the fair in Toronto, etc. But maybe through this light platform that's combined and friendly platform, what if they could also empower themselves to a larger audience? So those are, or by creating a partnership, for example, with another similar initiative outside of Vancouver. Could be all kind of ideas. Or for example, to bring a gallery like me, I think is a good idea. I would love to come back, but maybe also you should think of bringing dealers from different places just to, bonify, having different dealers each year, just to bring a different network each time, get the fair better known in different networks. Maybe one day a dealer from New York, for example, who's compatible with your views or things like that. Those are all kind of ideas that were coming to my mind during the week. But as I said, I think it really has to be your decision on how to do that, and how to keep the essence of that fair. Opening it maybe to a larger audience, but while keeping exactly the essence it has right now.
Yeah, thank you. And Lisa, if you can also share with us what do you see the fair contributing to the arts ecology in Vancouver long term, but as well if you can maybe add a little bit to Susie Mills' question about how do you select artists?
Well, for this show, it was very much in collaboration with the gallerists, but I would say in terms of overall the evolution, I mean, my joke is, I've never sold a piece of art in my life, so I'm just like, whoa, I'm just watching you guys do your thing. But I also feel wearing the curatorial hat, the educator hat, that for me, that's what's really powerful here is like, what are the ways that we can think about methodology, new ways of forming practices? And sometimes when we're busy in production mode, whether that's curatorial or gallerists working, we don't really talk necessarily about how we're doing what we're doing. So I think this is super important. And I think it's important, as the world evolves and we are thinking more about like things like ethics and values and care, which are I think things have shifted a little bit in terms of those conversations, and that really excites me. That is something that we can contribute to as a nonprofit. Griffin is a nonprofit with public funding support and our amazing founders, the Freibys and the foundation support. So I feel like that opportunity, that hinge that we have in that where our mandate is looking at private collections, showing private collections to the public that might not necessarily be seen otherwise. The generosity of the collectors in recognizing their role, that this is actually a kind of public role. Once you collect an artwork, that artwork actually has another life. It's certainly more privately, but it also has this other life. And I really enjoy the fact that you know the collectors we're working with really feel that and are willing to share their works with the public here. So so yeah, all of those things just feel like such natural resonance, and that was of course the gallerist instinct. I think in approaching Griffin, and I feel like that is you know we're just tip of the iceberg. So much more to come.
Thank you, Lisa. And if other galleries don't have anything to add, I think we're gonna wrap up. And let me replace the spotlight. There you go. So yeah, thank you, Monica. Thank you, Hugues. Thank you, Wil. Thank you, Tobin, and thank you, Lisa, for your time today in having this conversation about the art fair. And also thank you to the audience who joined us today for the conversation among the Combined Art Fair gallerists. You can visit the fair today on its last day from noon to 5 p.m. And lastly, I'll just mention that if you want to learn more about Griffin Art Projects, you can subscribe to our newsletter at the bottom of our website, which I'm putting into the chat box for you to check out. And we'll see you in 2023.
Thank you for facilitating.
So
Much
Thank
fun.
you, everyone.
Ready, thanks.